Hi everyone, how are you doing? Thank you for joining me. So last week I posted my review of the new Beatles themed film yesterday, and I got a really interesting question in the comments from a chap called Rami. Thank you for your question, Rami. Just going to read it out now. He said, do you feel this would be the stepping stone to finally getting a Beatles biopic? Now, I had to think about that, and my initial reaction was no, I don't think it is that stepping stone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I don't think we'll get that and what I think we might potentially more likely get instead. So the biopic films, they're obviously the flavour of the month at the moment with Bohemian Rhapsody, Queen, Elton John, Rocket Man, and I'm hearing that they're currently thinking of casting for an Elvis Presley film, and also rumours of a David Bowie film as well. So now's the time to do these because they're really popular. But I don't think that we're going to get one from the Beatles, and the reason being is mainly because the Beatles company Apple, it's such a democracy, a 25% split under the control of Paul, Ringo, Yoko and Olivia. And all four of those have got to agree to anything that's in any way official Beatles related before it gets released. And whilst they can do that for things like the big anniversary box set albums, like Sgt. Pepper White Album and such like, I think it's a whole different thing when it comes to portraying them in film, because you would have four different people with very opposing views about wanting to portray John in this way, or Paul in this light, or George and Ringo getting their amount of screen time, that I just don't see any way that they would that there would be a film that they would all agree to the content of, which is a shame, and I'd love to be proven wrong, but I just really can't see the logistics being overcome for a Beatles biopic. And it would be such a huge film anyway. I think, how would you cram everything that happened to the Beatles, or even the key points, into a movie? You'd probably have to concentrate on a really small section of the career, I would imagine. Because we've had unauthorised films before, things like The Birth of the Beatles and Backbeat. But of course, when it's unauthorised, you can't use any of the Beatles music. And whilst that was fine sort of 20, 30, 40 years ago, I just don't think you could get away with that now. It would be instantly seen as being not as valid as something like the Bohemian Rhapsody film, which actually used original Queen material. It was Freddie Mercury's voice on the songs. So ideally you'd want that in a Beatles film. You'd want it to be actual Beatles recordings, I would think, whether it's live recording, studio, whatever, with the actors miming it like Rami Malek did on Rami Malek on Bohemian Rhapsody. But I just cannot see any way that the four of them would agree to it. Now, maybe in decades' time, if the Beatles are still a popular money-making concern, then I could see it happening maybe once none of the original Beatles are in control of their companies, and maybe not even the children. Who knows what will happen in future, but ownership of the Beatles' rights might pass eventually to some sort of company. I really hope it doesn't happen, but let's face facts, it probably will do one day. It's maybe more likely to happen to them, but I don't think it'd happen now. But what I do think is possibly more likely to happen is either a Paul McCartney or a John Lennon solo biopic, so focusing on what happened after the Beatles, or maybe going from the split onwards. I can certainly see potential for something like that to be happening. Maybe there's already something been discussed already about something like this, I don't know. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about what might a Paul or John solo biopic look like. So who should we start with? Let's flip a coin. We'll start with John, okay? So I wouldn't be surprised if Yoko authorised something like this. So that there have been John biopic films and TV shows in the past, but there's not been a big thing like the recent biopics that we've had in the cinema. There's not been anything of that scale. And I wouldn't be surprised if Yoko wanted to get something out there, because we all know how much she loves keeping John's memory alive. Some people might have cynical views on why she's doing that, but I'm glad that she is, because the alternative is that it gets forgotten, and that doesn't benefit anybody. So I could imagine, for example, a John film that focuses on maybe him wanting to free himself from the Beatles, from the shackles of the Beatles, focusing on his early days with Yoko, getting married, and then how he invented himself as a solo artist, the sort of struggles that went on in his mind through the Plastic Ono band period, the success of Imagine. And Imagine's a great song to sort of hang this movie off. If you think that the Queen film had Bohemian Rhapsody as a song, the Elton John film, presumably, I haven't actually seen it yet, I'll admit, but I presume that Rocket Man is a prominent song in that film. You could imagine would be a great song to sort of hang off a John Lennon biopic. And then we've got his political period. And I was thinking about this, and how would the film end? Now, if it was Yoko who was involved in this and she was approving it, I wouldn't be surprised if it focused on when they split up in this sort of, when was it, around about sort of 73, 74 time, and them getting back together, and subsequently Sean being born. I could see that being maybe the sort of nice happy ending for the film, potentially. John finds contentment back with Yoko, he gets himself a new son, and he sort of leaves the music industry for a while. That would be a nice sort of happy ending. They could go through to 1980, but I think, would you really want to end the film on such a downer with what happened there? Maybe not. So yeah, that's how I see it. And I had a look at what sort of songs might be able to feature in this John biopic. So I've got a bit of a list here. So if we think the Beatles Yesterday film, I think they licensed, I think it was 17 songs they allowed the film to use. So I've come in with a sort of a similar amount here, and you could use some of them as full songs, some of them just as snippets here and there. But I'm just going to read out some songs that I think, that this is not necessarily what I think are his best songs, but these are maybe the songs that could be used to sort of signpost various points of his life in the sort of 1969, late 69 through to, let's say, 75 period. So Give Peace a Chance would be an obvious one, highlighting that whole sort of movement that him and Yoko were involved in, the bed-ins and all that kind of stuff. Cold Turkey, Instant Karma, God, what a statement that is on John leaving the Beatles and leaving that part of his life behind. Imagine, obviously, as I've said, and then things like Jealous Guy, Oh Yoko, New York City, maybe, again, not his greatest song, not from his greatest album certainly, but highlights a good sort of important period of his life. Happy Christmas, War Is Over would be a great one to put in there, because everybody knows it, whether you're a John Lennon fan or not. Maybe Mind Games, Whatever Gets You Through the Night, obviously been his big US #1 single with Elton. Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out would be a possibility, and Stand By Me, maybe to sort of highlight that sort of latter part of that period of his career. If they did go on to 1980, they could maybe bring in songs like Just Like Starting Over, Beautiful Boy, and Woman, maybe, but like I say, I think it's probably unlikely that they'd go there. So what do I think of the chances of a Yoko approved John Lennon biopic? I wouldn't be surprised at all. It'd be very interesting. I'd be very keen to see something like that. So let's see what happens, but that's pure speculation on my part. Okay, that's John. What about Paul? Paul's the interesting one for me here. Not that the John Lennon isn't, because I've just said I would love to see it, but in terms of what would inspire a Paul McCartney biopic, because he's still around, my question to myself is, would he approve this? Would he instigate it? And I can see it happening. One thing that we know about Paul is that he's very, very concerned about his legacy, how he'll be seen in the future. I think a lot of it is probably driven by what happened when the Beatles split up, the animosity that happened for a while with him and John until they cut that out. And then, of course, with John dying and John's sort of been held up as, dare I say it, sort of Saint John, and Paul becoming an older man in front of our eyes, which is something that unfortunately John never got the chance to do. So I think Paul's always been very keen to to promote his legacy, both for while he's alive and for well into the future. So I wouldn't be surprised if he instigated a Paul McCartney biopic. And so again, if he was going to do that, what sort of things might he concentrate on, or what might he want in that film? And thinking about it, if we look at the archive collection albums that we've had over the last few years, so we've got that early period covered now of those first few albums of when the Beatles were breaking up, and how he dealt with that. And we know a lot more about his frame of mind there. It was a very fragile frame of mind. So he struggled to cope for a while. So you could imagine that working quite well in film, about how did he deal with the breakup of the Beatles? How did he start making music again? How did he decide to put Wings together and go back on the road? And I can see this film, if it happens, showing, I think it would be sort of a two-pronged film. Part of it would be him and Linda and their sort of early life together. And part of it would be him building up his music career and becoming Paul McCartney solo star. Or I say solo, obviously was with Wings, but he was obviously the main star of Wings. So I could see this film potentially going up to maybe Wings Over America, 1976 tour, and just that point where they became one of the biggest stadium bands in the world. He'd sort of proved himself. He'd gone through the difficulty of starting up his career, of putting out some albums that weren't massively well received at the time, and then sort of moving into the Band on the Run era, where he actually then suddenly sold millions and millions of copies, and everyone realised sort of what wonderful songs he could still make as a solo artist, and how that led on to Venus and Mars and that massive tour. And I could see it ending with that massive tour, and you could imagine like a last scene in the film of him on stage, and he's just finished belting out something like Maybe I'm Amazed or Live and Let Die, and he's taking massive applause from the crowd, and that's the sort of highlight, the end of the film. He's here, he's made it, he's Paul McCartney, he's not just ex-Beatle Paul anymore. So yeah, I could see that happening as well. And again, I had a thought about a track list. So I've put together a list of a few songs that I think could potentially be involved. Again, these are not what I think are necessarily all his best songs from that era, but maybe the songs that could work well in the setting of a film. Some may be better than others. But those sort of early days of struggling to cope with coming out of the Beatles, I could certainly see them using Every Night there. You know, every night I just want to go out, get out of my head, and it shows what that sort of troubled frame of mind he was in at the time. Maybe I'm Amazed is his anthem for Linda, which I still regard as the best song he's ever done, to be honest. I could certainly see that being in there. And then things like maybe Another Day, Backseat of My Car, Hi Hi Hi, I could certainly see that being in there, because it was banned. And I think Paul loves the chance to sort of remind us that he could be edgy, he could get songs banned. He wasn't just rolling out things like Mary Had a Little Lamb and later on the Frog Chorus and such like. So I could see maybe Hi 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 being in there. My Love, Live and Let Die is an absolute must if the film gets made, because is that his most well-known post-Beatles song? I'm not sure. Maybe it is. It's certainly a contender anyway. Band on the Run, that'd be another obvious one to use. 1985 possibly. Listen to What the Man Said, Silly Love Songs. And then I'm thinking, if they do this and they finish with the big sort of rock concert at the end that from the Wings Over America tour, then you could have that medley, the Venus and Mars Rock Show Jet medley that opens up. You probably wouldn't do the whole however many minutes it is, because it's quite a long section, but you could certainly dip in and out of that. And like I say, maybe finish with Maybe I'm Amazed, or it could finish with Live and Let Die, for example, a live version from there. So there's certainly a way that you can see a potential story that they could use, and a natural sort of start and end point. So again, can I see a Paul biopic happening? I really could, to be honest. I wouldn't put it past Paul McCartney to instigate it. Maybe, or certainly approve it if he thought the right person was going to make the film. As to who would play John or Paul in such films, I have absolutely no idea. If you've got any thoughts, let me know. Who would you like to see to play sort of approximately late 20s, early 30s versions of John Lennon and Paul McCartney? No idea, to be honest. Love to hear from you on that. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Rami's question of did I feel this would be a stepping stone to getting a Beatles biopic? No, I don't, for the reasons I've mentioned. But the John and Paul ones, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. It'd be very interesting if the two of them came out in a similar time period. Let's get a bit of John versus Paul rivalry going again. That'd be fun. We've not had that for a little while. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Thank you very much for watching. If you've got any thoughts on what I've just said, whether you think it'll happen, whether you think they could overcome the differences, or not the differences, but all the 4 requirements for the film and actually get a Beatles biopic out. If you think that could work, let me know why you think it could work. And if you've not been to see the Yesterday film yet, please go and see it. It is superb. It's a must for any Beatles fans. I'm hearing a lot of Beatles fans saying, not going, I'm not going to see it, I don't want to see it, I don't want to know about it. And okay, fair enough, that's your right, but I do happen to think that you're missing out there. I know a lot of people who've sort of changed their minds once they've seen it and said that they think it's absolutely fantastic. So I definitely recommend that anyway. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again soon sometime. Thank you very much. Bye bye.